Hi, Sammy from Barnhanger Studios, and today I'm going to do my drum mixing video. So we've got the drum tracks recorded, and now we're going to show you how I would go about mixing them here at Barnhanger Studios. So we take a look inside our DAW, we'll see 8 channels of recording with some hidden samples which we're going to add later. But first of all, we're just going to get some basic levels. So if you notice, when I recorded this, I was playing to a kick of 115 beats per minute. So if I just play it for you now, we'll see a few things we want to change. But firstly, we want to make a decision on whether we're going to quantize this kit or not. So you see, obviously the first beat was a bit off, but by and large, it's, relatively, on the beat, nearly there, So the way we're going to do this is if we unhide our samples so we can quantize these as well, because those samples are linked to the original performance. So we highlight all of these, and we want to make sure that we're grouping them in the same group. So we go new, and we're going to name that drums, and we're going to go to settings, and then we're going to turn off automation, volume, and mute, and make sure we've got editing and quantize locked selected, and then we're going to press quantize, and then we're going to go 1/8 notes. You see little movements just happened, and if we just zoom in, say, to this the beginning of the 6th bar, we'll see that all the kicks are right on line, as well as that hi-hat there. That's completely optional. Some people think it ruins the performance, other people think it just makes the mixing process a lot easier, which of course it does, because if we wanted to add synths on top of this inside Logic, then we could quantize those, and we would take half the time. So we take the editing off now, obviously, so we can edit these individually. But we notice that all the tracks are quantized. So we go ahead and hide those samples again. And we give it a listen now that it's been quantized. Of course, if you was a million miles off the metronome, then that's not going to work. And the reason I chose 1/8 notes is because that's what the hi-hat's playing. So we're not playing any subdivisions quicker than that. So that just makes the most sense. If we did 1/16 notes, it might pick up bleed on other microphones and think that that's a beat, and it might get all confused. So first things first, we're going to add a gate plugin to all of the drums except for the hi-hat and the overhead. So if we select all of these and we go ahead and add the silencer plugin from Black Salt Audio. So you have that loaded up. We'll ignore that for now. I'm just going to make sure that this silencer plugin is the first in the chain of all of these drums. So we're not EQing frequencies that we're going to want to cut out. So we, silence, gate it first, and then we can EQ after. So if I just solo this kick for now, which we can barely hear because of the silence plugins. We make sure we've got the kick selected and bring down this threshold. So the big thing we want to reject on the kick is the snare. So if I go to maximum dB reduction and then we give a bit of length, let's listen to that. So we can still hear the snare, which is okay. You don't want to completely reject it, but that's a very good starting point. Now we're just going to quickly go over to the other parts of the drum and do that as well. So solo the snare. Maximum reduction, little tail. That seems to work. For the toms, I'm just going to duplicate the same reduction. So I'm just going to go to the part of the drum fill where we play a tom. So obviously hear the snare a little bit, but that's a lot clearer. And then we're just going to delete the plugin on the other one, and then we're going to duplicate that across. So now if we solo the drum kit, apart from the hi-hat and the overheads, we should hear very little cymbal bleed. And that just allows that hi-hat and the crash cymbal to be very consistent throughout the whole song. So we're not dealing with how much bleed's going through the snare with how loud the hi-hat is. We have one fader for the hi-hat, and that's how loud it's going to be for the whole track. So now let's get to doing some EQing. So if we start with the kick, and we just give it a little listen, and do some minor adjusting. Let's take that solo off. I think 60 Hertz is a good place to start for this kick. And then let's get rid of some of the mud in, a big Q all the way from maybe 500 to 700. And then we just want to get a bit of air into the kick. So about 4K to about 4.5K is where we're going to get that. So let's play this. Before EQ, after, just fuller and rejecting those frequencies that we don't want. And now we're going to do a bit of gating. Even though we've done one gate, what I want to do is use this SSL gate to get a real pop effect on that kick. So if we keep soloed here, we'll play the drum, and then maximum range, so we're rejecting everything, and then slowly bringing this in. And then a fast attack. And context. There's not quite as much attack on that kick as I want, but I do have a sample to fix that, and obviously I can compress this kick to get that effect as well. So I'm not going to use the compressor for the SSL. For kick drums, I prefer using the distressor emulator from Softube. So we go and press mono. It will load up our distressor, and we're going to play around with that with the kick. A good rule of thumb is not having a fast attack on the kick compressor, and having a quick release as well. Not that quick, so that's actually probably about what we want already. So that's a good starting point. So let's move over to the snare. And now we're going to use this SSL plugin again. So let's solo it, have a listen. So let's quickly do a high pass. I think I high pass when recording, but it doesn't hurt to do it again. So about 100 to save a zone to high pass the snare before we use our graphic to find out exactly what the frequency is being cut off. But basically, a rule of thumb is high pass until you can hear a difference, because a lot of these frequencies we are cutting out are ones that aren't audible but might make the mix muddy when it's all layered up, or when it's being played through like subwoofers and different sound systems. You might pick it up then. Also, we're rejecting the kick as well by high passing the snare. Let's keep going. About 200 for the boost. Bit throaty. Let's try and reject some of this resonance, which is about 500 or so. Quite a wide Q. And now we just want to add a little bit of air at the top, about 8K. And I will use the SSL compressor for the snare. Threshold. You want a quick release, but not that quick. And let's just reduce the gain there. That's a good sounding snare to go on with. Let's just play some context. Already a million miles more effective. Okay, so now we're going to do the hi-hat. So I'm not going to use the SSL for that. I'm just going to do this on a graphic EQ. So open up our one from FabFilter and give this a listen. Obviously, first thing is going to do a massive high pass. Let's just find some frequencies that aren't nice. At around 4 to 7K is where we're going to find those. At 10K plus is a nice airy sound. We might just dip that in volume. So find one's poking out and then just experiment by doing very narrow cuts. Play in context. Okay, we sound good. So now let's do the overhead. So again, not going to use the SSL because I really want to fine tune this. So the same high pass that you did on the snare, you should do on the overhead because we're only capturing the snare and above. We're not capturing the kick because it wouldn't sound very nice. So we might capture the kicks sort of in the room with its higher frequencies, but not lower than not in this 100 plus zone. So if we go right to 100 and start playing, maybe a little bit more. First cut I'm going to do is at this sort of 600 range, just kind of take away the frequencies that we don't want. So if you're imagining that this is going to be in a track with guitars and that, this is where the guitars live, in this low mid sort of range. So it's best to cut it, because if you don't cut it, then there's no room for the guitars. And then when it comes to doing limiting and compressing the whole track together, it's not going to mesh well. Also, we're dipping a little bit of the resonance of the snare out again. I just want to find that. And then if you don't like the sound of the snare in the overheads, which is possible, it might sound bad in the room, then you should duck it out. But I quite like the snare and I want to increase those frequencies at about 200. I'm just going to duck these high, harshish frequencies from the hi-hat. Okay, now I'm just going to add a reverb to our cymbals first. So if we go and do our flex verb, and on the overhead, what we want is a very subtle reverb. So an ambient reverb is perfect because it will gel it together, but it's not going to sound dramatic. So let's turn it off and let's play. Let's turn it on. Sounds really nice. And now the hi-hat as well, I want to reverb on this because I want to, when I reverb them all together, when I bust them down, I want a different sound on the hi-hat because it can sound a bit tinny otherwise. So it's very good to, if you want a different sound for the hi-hat, you know, just add the reverb onto the track or send a bus to the track. But as this plugin has a dry wet setting anyway, I don't mind just adding it to the end of the chain. Let's do something. Let's hear this chamber. Solo it. On solo. So So what I've noticed is that the way I've got these set up, that cymbal sounds a bit quiet at the end. So I'm just going to do a very quick piece of automation on this, as it's the last hit, which is loop's annoying. As it's the last hit, if I take this loop off, let me just play it, which is this one here. So if I just press this here, do literally a few dB, just to increase that overhead sound. Obviously the hi-hat's not picking up the cymbals, that's the only channel we can use to increase the cymbal sound. Take that automation off. Before we bust this down, I'm going to add some samples. So if I take my hidden tracks away, the samples that I'm using are samples of the actual kit that's being used. And the reason we do this is because I recorded just one mic on the kick, what I wasn't able to do was record a condenser mic further away from the kick, or I wasn't able to put a mic right in front of the batter head with the pedal to get that snappy attack sound. So this kick in sample is literally a sample of a 57, a dynamic 57 right in front of that pedal, just to get this really snappy sound. So if I solo that, it's got the silencer plugin annoyingly. So that's not a sound you necessarily would want, but if we combined it with the original, and this next sample is a combination of the two mics just bust down into one track. So it's a Rode K2 condenser further away, and then a 57 right inside of it. But that's just a sample together. So if I solo that as well. And together in the track. Obviously now we're in danger of clipping, so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take all of that and just duck it a little bit. What I'm going to do very quickly as well is just going to create a track stack for these kicks. Technically I'm bussing it down, but actually I'm just grouping them together so that I can put an EQ to control all of them. So a mono bus effectively now with this EQ, which is just the kick. So now we've got that kick all together. So what we can notice from that is we do a little high pass. And now we can take out frequencies very specifically. So I don't want this 100 zone. This is where the bass lives and where the bottom end of the snare lives. I still don't want this mud. I can see these higher frequencies need a little attending to. I can turn this whole thing down and let's listen to it in the full track. And now let's do the same thing with the snare. So a couple of different samples. Again, a similar thing, just different angles on the snare, different variations. Now let's bust those down into a track stack as well. Also, it makes a lot more sense for the faders as well, just to have one fader to control all of the snares once we've attenuated between them within themselves. Now I've got one fader that just controls all the snares, which makes a lot of sense. So again, let's just do another little graphic EQ on a mono channel. High pass. Again, whenever you add samples, it does bring the danger of clipping a lot more to reality. But now we've done all of that and we've got it kind of sounding about what we want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bus all of these down into a drum bus. So it's got all those selected, and then we're just going to set the output bus auxiliary 1, which is the one we've got loaded up already. And just name that drum bus. Nice. And then as we bring this up, we'll see we can control our bus here, but I'm just going to put a preset, this preset. So I'm going to add a drum strip to this, and this is the only real way of fixing these cymbal sounds, in my opinion. So if I put a stereo, and if we play it through with it disengaged, we just cycle through to this fix anything. We're not going to do the low, and we're going to take out a lot of dB because I know it's going to be very gain heavy, this. But let's just play this. Now I've got that in a good place. Let's just do an EQ for everything. So a little high pass, as if we were doing a kick, so about 20. Just rejecting it at every opportunity. Of course, it's probably making no difference, but it's peace of mind. Okay, let's take the mud out. Okay, clipping all over the place. So let's just do some very quick reductions. Now I'm just going to add a reverb to the whole thing. So I'm going to pick a room with this stereo compressor, which would be the Oak Room. I like this one a lot. And on the end of this, I'm going to add a limiter from a FabFilter, stereo limiter. I'm just going to reduce the output a lot and add just the gain. My snare's a bit loud in this mix. Let's just do some compressing on this snare now, just to make this come alive a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attenuate this reverb because it's booming a little bit too much. One thing I've not done is, finally, let's do some panning before we do that. So both things we need to pan is the hi-hat and the floor tom from audience perspective. Okay, we're all done. Everything's done. So let's just take off all of these plugins. And this is what it sounded like before we touched it. And now this is what it sounds like with all of these plugins enabled. Thank you for watching.